This is Jumping In, the short-form series of the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each week I have the opportunity to speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. Our long-form series has been an opportunity to go deep, unpack all aspects of our guest and their story. For Jumping In, just like our Jedburgh teams of World War II, I want to get on and off the drop zone fast. I want to catch up with previous guests, give my opinion on what's happening in the world, and uncover some of today's most pressing issues. The entire Jedburgh podcast is sponsored by Jersey Mike Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving back and building community together. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. Check out our website for full transcriptions of every episode at jedburghpodcast.com. Follow us on social media at Jedburgh Podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts and watch our full video versions on YouTube. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.
We're not talking about anything advanced, just basic maneuverability, squad, file, column, wedge, raid, ambush, react to contact, battle drills, simple mission planning, how to use a compass and a protractor.
Russia invaded Ukraine over 5 months ago. At first, the world stopped and seemingly all efforts, resources, attention was shifted to Eastern Europe. World markets dropped, oil prices skyrocketed. Today, we continue to feel these effects, but the conflict, it's largely faded from the headlines in the Western world. Yet, thousands have been killed to date, and many continue to die on both sides of the war each day. For an update on Ukraine, I jumped in with Daniel Elkins, CEO of Special Operations Association of America. Daniel was my guest on episode 33, where we covered SOAA's mission, his career as a Green Beret in the Special Forces, and SOAA's commitment to legislative advocacy for all special operations. SOAA just signed an agreement with the Ukrainian government to train their soldiers in basic combat fundamentals. They're one of the first nonprofits to be authorized to officially train the Ukrainians, and they're working on U.S. government approval right now. Daniel and I talk about Ukraine. We talk about SOAA's efforts in the region and the toll the war's taken on the Ukrainian people. We also circle back on Afghanistan and SOAA's calls for a full investigation into the withdrawal and what they're doing now to support the Afghan refugees. Take a listen on your favorite podcast platforms. Watch the full video version of my conversation with Daniel on YouTube. Subscribe to us and follow us at Jedburgh Podcast on all social media. And check out our website, jedburghpodcast.com. Learn more about Special Operations Association of America and get involved at SOAA.org and follow them on all social media at SOAA.org. Daniel, welcome back to the Jedburgh Podcast. Great to see you again.
Man, it's great to be back. I appreciate the opportunity to come back and speak to your audience.
Well, we last connected in episode 33. It's been about 8-9 months since we had that conversation. It was right after the withdrawal out of Afghanistan, and we had a great conversation about not only what was going on with Special Operations Association of America and SOAA's efforts in Afghanistan, helping refugees evacuate, and then also SOAA's efforts lobbying Congress and legislative affairs on behalf of all special operators. We also told your story as a Green Beret coming up through the ranks, and then now how you transitioned into leading this organization and still serving. I mean, I was trying. We've been going back and forth for a couple of weeks now, and you were at dive school, so I couldn't even get a hold of you.
Yeah, so I was at dive sustainment for 19th group. So going through some of the iterations. Hopefully, dive school's in my cards coming up. It's definitely something that was a nail biter for sure. It's the hardest training I've ever done.
Yeah, I'm not, I was on a mountain team, so I'm not interested in it. I'm good. I like the water, but I don't go underneath it.
There's that whole thing about not breathing, so I get it.
Yeah, I like to breathe a little bit, but listen, I wanted to connect because you guys and SOAA have embarked on a new series of initiatives, and I think that they're truly impactful to, not only the special operations community, but leadership writ large. And how do you as an organization continue to be front and center in societal affairs that are changing the world, and most specifically the situation in Ukraine. You've been in Ukraine. You've been for the last couple of months. You've been working with the government in Ukraine and have just become one of the lead training units for the government and the military. And this is something that it happens in various places in the world. It's a first in Ukraine, and it is a really amazing opportunity to get you and SOAA out there to truly make a difference in this conflict. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I really appreciate being able to kind of talk about this ad nauseum. So, my history with Ukraine started in 2019 through 2020 when I was deployed there as the SOFLI, the Special Operation Liaison element. So I worked out of the embassy in Kiev, and I was the liaison
I've been to
between.
that embassy. That's a nice
Have you?
embassy.
It
I
is.
have.
It's very nice. Yeah. So I was in charge of running concurrence for anything SOCUR did within the country, as well as in charge of ensuring that all the import exports for our AOB that was there were done successfully. So, through that, I had a chance to develop some really interesting relationships with people in Parliament, people in the Ministry of Defense, as well as within UKRSOCOM specifically, and developed a deep love for the country. We were there providing training and assistance to them, and I really think that the last 6 months shows just how valuable that training was. But when everything kicked off, I knew that we were going to be a part of it, and it was going to be more involved than we were within Afghanistan during the evacuation efforts. Because as the organization's grown, we are firmly seated in a position of support to our allies worldwide, not only assuring that they get the care and treatment that they deserve, but also to ensure that we maintain those strategic relationships. So I ended up going over in mid-April through till in May, and reconnected with many of my old contacts. And we were primarily delivering humanitarian aid, whether that be fuel, medical supplies, things to the frontline fighters that needed them the most. But I started to just kind of engage with a few of my old colleagues just to kind of get the ground truth. And that's really what SOAA is all about. It's about being able to bring the ground truth back to the halls of Congress to help inform people, what they need to do. And that's when we were, confronted with this massive training issue that I hope we can kind of unpack a little bit.
So that what was the ground truth? What were they telling you about what was going on in the fight against Russia?
Yeah, so like they were successful in repelling the first wave, and I personally assess that the end state that the Russians were looking to do were to completely annex the entirety of Ukraine and bring it into the Russian Federation and install a pro-Russian leader, and they were unsuccessful in doing that for numerous reasons. But in the process, one of the things that the Ukrainian government did was they sought to seek an increase in their troop size. And as a result of the influx of people joining the military, joining the territorial defense, that had a severely rapid scalability problem. So to kind of solve that, they condensed their training pipelines. They changed their basic training POI to be half of what it was, and in some cases we witnessed units getting 5 to 10 days of training before being sent to the front lines. So as we
It's like
kind
a
of made.
violation of all the soft principles that
Oh,
we talk about. Quality over quantity. Don't
yeah,
sacri- You
can't
can't
mass produce.
sacrifice. Can't mass produce. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was super apparent. So we ended up meeting with the head of the territorial defense, and had a conversation about what was needed and the potential capabilities that we could bring to assist what they were doing, or I should say train and advise on what they were doing. And it resulted in confirmation of what we were seeing, which is the fighting force that's now going to the front is well equipped due to the generous aid that the world is providing to the Ukrainians, and they're getting
$40 billion from the U.S.
Yeah, but they're lacking trainers to teach them basic soldiering skills. We're not talking about anything advanced, just basic maneuverability. Squad. File, column, wedge. Raid, ambush, react to contact.
It's like battle drills, like
Battle
basic
drills,
foundational
yeah,
battle
simple
drills.
mission planning, how to use a compass and a protractor, how to communicate with hand and arm signals. These are things that we often take for granted, but I think as members of the SOF community, and specifically the Green Beret community, this is what we were designed to do. So when I was witnessing this need, I was very much excited at the opportunity to move the needle. So what inevitably happened was we got a formal request from the Ukrainian government to provide trainers to send to Ukraine. And then we started to go through the legal certification process. So, in order
With the State Department, because you said it
yeah,
has to be cleared by the State Department in the
exactly,
U.S.
right. And that's what really I think is the main difference between humanitarian aid and then lethal aid, or lethal training, right? And it's just this formality that you need to go through, but it's very, very important formality, right? And it ensures that both the host nation knows what you're doing and the State Department and DoD have awareness of what you're doing. So, we've gone through the process of becoming ITAR certified, and then we also have a TAA that's been signed and put in place with the Ukrainians. So, right now we're in the final stages of doing some fundraising and getting our DSP-5 approved. And hopefully by mid-August, early September, we should be able to put a team on the ground of about 20 people to start this training pipeline with the end state to set up mobile training teams, right? So we're going to go and we're going to evaluate what they currently are doing, make recommendations, train to standard, and enable them to rinse and repeat and do it on their own. So I'm very excited to actually move the needle, and we're in a unique position in order to be able to do it.
We talk about leadership on the podcast. We talk about leadership in special forces. You mentioned core special forces mission being similar to this. I mean, this is what it is. I mean, look at the Jedburghs, the Jedburgh podcast. What do the Jedburghs do? 3-man teams, first special operators jumped into occupied France that started the night before D-Day, and their mission was to link up with indigenous forces, French resistance forces, who were farmers, who were owned shops, who were mechanics. They were not trained soldiers. They were not regular soldiers of the French military. And the mission was to equip them, to train them, and then deploy them forward to confront the German reinforcements from getting to Normandy and reinforce those beaches. They succeeded in that mission. It changed the world. We've seen this time and time again. We've seen this in Afghanistan with 5th Group after 9/11. We had Chris Miller on, former Secretary of Defense, on episode 25, where we talked about the invasion of Afghanistan, linking up with the Northern Alliance. I've seen this in Africa. I've done this in Africa, where we've found subsets of different military units all throughout Africa, train them, equip them. This mission is so important because our job as leaders is to empower others to solve their problems and find resolution, and do it consistently over time, so that America doesn't constantly have to solve everybody's problem. We train them, we equip them, we get them forward, and they take the lead. This is pretty awesome. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah.
You talked about fundraising and needing to bring in some support to fund this operation. How do people get involved in it, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will provide you and to all the listeners in the show notes below. You can click the link to donate. It is a tax deductible donation. And there is no margin, if you will. Everything is at cost, right? And that's one of the things I think that a lot of people are surprised at, is that, why are you doing this? Why isn't the federal government doing this? And unfortunately, in this current environment, the reason that the U.S. government's not doing it is because that could potentially look like escalation, right? So there is a need that is currently out there for our allies that for-profit companies aren't willing to fill because there's no government contracts yet. So people might ask, well, what happened with all that $40 billion? Well, it takes time. It takes time for that to kind of trickle down and proposals to go in. And what I think with my analysis of the current environment is we're in this critical stage right now where I think the next 4 to 6 months have the ability to shift the tides significantly one way or another. And I don't think that we're going to see the full-blown implementation of any sort of government subsidies meet the ground in that duration. And I don't expect there to be official DoD boots on the ground in any real capacity until well after the midterms. So we have the ability to move the needle now, and that's what we're going to do.
There's the call to action for anybody there who's looking to get involved in a legitimate way. And I think what you're talking about, doing this above board, getting sanctioned by the government, is really, really important, because that's what separates SOA's ability to maintain professionalism as an organization versus being mercenaries running around the battlefield and creating chaos. So that's it's really, really important. Let me ask you about Afghanistan. So last time we spoke was on the tail end of the withdrawal out of Afghanistan. You had been out in the Middle East in some of the reception centers for the folks that we were airlifting out and then dropping in various different cities and countries around the world so that we could process them and figure out what's next. What's SOA doing now with regard to Afghanistan? I know that that there has been a call from the organization for a full investigation into the withdrawal and the causes and the effects that have happened. Where's the focus going?
Yeah, well, I think those are really good questions, and we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the orchestrated or botched withdrawal that resulted in 13 U.S. American troops that were killed there. And I think now is the time to change the tone that we had consistently in the media last fall. I've been taught that in the midst of a crisis, for example, in a firefight, that's probably not the time to ask how did this start and who started it. Why did this happen? You need to respond to the threat and the emergency. And that's what we did last fall. We were successful from August to the end of January in helping rescue around 7,000 of our Afghan allies and Americans, citizens, and their families. And we chartered multiple aircraft, and we provided assistance to those on the ground that were being hunted by the Taliban by setting up safe houses. We fed and clothed and provided medical aid and shelter to those that were significantly being targeted. But the situation changed on the ground, and we did the job that we wanted to do there. And now we've transitioned to engaging in the advocacy side of the house and trying to ensure that this never happened. And that's the question, right? Is how did it happen? And now is the time to ask that question, right? Did we really not know that this was going to happen, right? Really, let's be honest, right? I feel it's pretty obvious to anyone if you looked at the time-lapsed photography of the map going red closer and closer to Kabul. I don't think that it was a surprise to anyone in our community that it happened. So how is it that the U.S. government managed to miss this in such a major way? And I think that those questions need to be asked. And I think that, look, the hearings that have gone on about this have been closed. So that adds a whole level of difficulty for the American people to know what's going on, and it just looks bad. I'm not insinuating that fault was rendered to blame anyone. But if there's nothing to hide, then why continue to close the door? It just doesn't make sense to me. So that is why we called on the committees to have an open hearing. And we think that that's the best way to honor those that served alongside of us and those that died last year.
Are you getting any answers?
Yeah, so obviously politics is coming into play. One of the things that it is, and it's unfortunate, but that's the environment, the operational environment we work in. And I've heard from Republicans and from Democrats both that are very interested in addressing this post midterms. I think that there's going to be a lot of press this month on this topic. And I think that it is important for us to not forget what happened and why it happened. And it's our hope that with the elevation of this issue as the anniversary approaches, that more light will be drawn to it. And now we can start asking those really tough questions to ensure something like this never happens again.
Well, Daniel, it's always a pleasure having you on, talking about these different issues that are facing, not only all of our veterans and our special operations community. What you guys are doing at SOAA and it is truly impactful. It continues to be for us at home and abroad. You're carrying on the SF and the special forces and special operations legacy. You're putting the missions forward, creating impact in so many different regions of the world. I appreciate you coming back on, sharing what you're doing. We got to get people involved. They can go to SOAA.org, learn more about your organization, what you're doing in Ukraine, what you're doing in Afghanistan, what you're doing here on the Hill and legislative battles that you're facing. And they can also listen to episode 33, where we dig into the whole thing. We talk about your story, we talk about your background, what drives you, what makes you a great leader of this organization and the SOF community. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and look forward to checking in again sometime next year.
Stay safe. American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.